The Sigma 35mm F1.2 Mark II lens is improved in every single way over the original. And in this video, I'm going to be reviewing this lens from the perspective of a wedding and commercial filmmaker and telling you about all of its improvements, including some improvements over things that I never saw other reviewers talking about with the original 35 F1.2, meaning this review should be extremely helpful to you as a filmmaker as you make the decision of whether you should buy this lens. As always though, for the sake of ethics, I want you to know this video is not paid or sponsored by Sigma, and while they did loan me this lens so I could make this review, I will sadly be returning it to them very soon. Now, starting with the original Sigma 35 F1.2 now, I filmed a wedding with that lens soon after it was first announced way back in 2019, and I used that lens throughout the entire wedding day, finding that I really enjoyed the low light performance and gorgeous bokeh that I was able to get. But I have to say, at the same time, that lens felt a bit ahead of its time, in the sense that it definitely had some rough edges that Sigma still needed to improve upon and hopefully fix with a second generation lens. One of the first areas that needed improvement was definitely the size. That lens was a chonker. It weighed almost 2.5 pounds. It was thick. It was long. It used a ton of glass. It felt a bit like Sigma said, hey, here's one of the world's first f1.2 35mm lenses. Yes, it has compromises. Please buy it anyways. I filmed almost an entire wedding day with that lens, and while it worked great, my arms were definitely tired because it made my camera setup so incredibly heavy. But here we are with the 35 F1.2 Mark II, and Sigma has had time to work on it and make huge improvements as far as size goes. It is now 20% smaller than the original at only 113 millimeters versus 136, and 30% lighter at 744 grams instead of 1090. Or another point of comparison, in case you haven't used the original 35 1.2, the Sony 50mm F1.2 GM lens weighs 778 grams, so this Sigma 35 F1.2 is actually lighter than that lens. Even more impressive, the 35 F1.2 Mark II is actually roughly the same length as Sigma's 35mm F1.4, but it also lets in a lot more light. They've really done some wizardry here with this lens. It's to the point now where I have no worries about recommending the Mark II version of this lens for handheld filmmaking all day, or putting it on a gimbal, or even a DJI mini gimbal that will easily handle the weight of this lens. Next, keeping on the size of this lens for a bit longer, I want you to notice the filter thread size is now only 72 millimeters. The original was 82 millimeters, which made buying filters for it more expensive because they were so large. So Sigma have managed to shrink the needed filter size as well, which is an improvement that's great to see. From a buttons and controls point of view, this lens is essentially identical to the original 35 1.2, and that isn't a bad thing. Quite a while ago, Sigma chose a standard set of controls for the lenses that has worked very well. So with the 35 1.2, you're getting a programmable button, you're getting an aperture ring that can be made clickless if you want, or also locked, and an autofocus manual focus switch as well. But the autofocus and manual focus capabilities of this lens are what we really need to talk about, because the original Sigma 35 F1.2 had an issue that I noticed that has been fixed with this second generation. When I was filming a wedding with the first gen lens, I ran into an issue where if the focus was racked too far in one direction, basically if the focus was near the minimum focusing distance where I'd been filming a person up close, but then I moved the camera to try and make it focus on a person in the distance, or vice versa, the autofocus would tend to get confused. And sometimes, more often than not, it just wouldn't refocus on anything. It would just stay focused at the point where it has been at. And the only workaround I had was to quickly switch the lens to manual focus, then adjust the focus with the focus ring, and then turn autofocus back on, which would then make the autofocus start working again. Thankfully, this new Sigma 35 F1.2 Mark II does not have this issue. And whenever I tested the autofocus in a variety of conditions, both bright and dark, and at a variety of different distances, both super close up and far away, I did not see any issues with this 35 F1.2. It worked great. Also, it might have to do with it using newer generation enhanced magnetic autofocus motors as well, which can really help with speed and accuracy. So I gotta say, the autofocus for the 35 F1.2 Mark II performed extremely well. Now, as far as focus breathing goes, I'm happy to tell you that while this lens does have slight focus breathing, it really is minimal, which is great to see on a lens that does not have access to Sony's lens breathing compensation feature due to it being a third-party lens. But Sigma have told me they have prioritized minimizing focus breathing with this lens, and I think that they've really achieved that. Now, as far as image quality goes, while I do not have the original 35 f1.2 handy to put up directly head-to-head against the new one, Sigma has told me it has been improved optically, and in my testing of the new lens, it looks incredible. Sigma has really been on a bokeh roll with lenses like their 200mm f2, 135 f1.4, and now we're getting an updated 35 f1.2. If you go bonkers for bokeh like I do, you're gonna love this lens. It just looks so good, and I have to say that while a 50mm f1.2 lens is nice, there's something about having that shallow depth of field on a wider lens like a 35 that looks so good because it's just so wide at the same time. There's a reason that I filmed basically an entire wedding day with the original 35 f1.2 lens, and it's because it not only looked good, but it was also wide enough to put on a gimbal, but tight enough that I could still go handheld with it and get closer when I needed to. 35mm is such a versatile focal length, and so if you were thinking about getting a lens with incredible bokeh and insane low light performance, and you wanted something that wasn't quite as niche as a 200mm or 135 or heck, even a 50, there is a reason that a 35mm has been such a go-to for so many photographers and filmmakers for so many years, and that's because it can really do everything. Because of that, I think you're going to absolutely love the Sigma 35 f1.2, and I highly recommend this lens. Speaking of things that I highly recommend, I also highly recommend downloading my filmmaker gear guide. That's going to show you all of the equipment that I recommend for filmmaking. I will link to that down in the video description. It is completely free for you to download. Thanks so much for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you loved it, and have a great day.